Welcome ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to check out the solo stamina Warden PvE build for the Greymore chapter. You can solo overland, world bosses, public dungeons, normal 4-man dungeons or even veteran 4-man dungeons alone with this setup. It is very powerful. You can find the timestamps in the description, and if you want the written guide it's on alcasthq.com. I also put the link in the description. Let's take a look at the stats. So we are around 19k health with our minor toughness buff, which is pretty exclusive to Wardens, which is nice. I always recommend having around 19,000 health because it prevents a lot of one-shots. So if you don't reach this with 10 points into the health attribute, you could pump more points in here and remove some of stamina. If we don't have that much stamina, it doesn't matter. Like 30k, 27k, it's no big deal, but the health value is important. Stamina recovery, we have around 1491. If you're buffed up, it goes to almost 1700, so that's a good level, so we have enough sustain. Other stats, weapon damage in combat jumps over 4000, and weapon critical jumps up to like 59%, so that's very powerful. And our resistances are also nice because we have the Ice Fortress, which also applies minor protection, giving us 8% more damage mitigation. It's just a lot of cool stuff on the Warden. I recommend running the Lower Mundus Stone to increase your physical penetration. It will boost your damage like crazy. In terms of buff food, you want to use Lava Food Soup and Salteries. This gives 4936 stamina and 493 stamina recovery. That's huge. You can buy this one in the guild store. It barely costs anything. So you can buy 100 and it costs maybe 5000 gold. That's basically for free. But make sure to use this one. A lot of players that run builds often use the wrong buff food and then they don't understand why the sustain is bad and stuff like that. Because this one has 493 stamina recovery. That's a crazy amount. Potions on a Warden, on this build, you can just use the normal Essence of Stamina potions because we do have Bull Netch, which gives us Major Brutality, and Green Lotus, which gives us Major Savagery. That's 20% more damage, 10% more weapon crit. So we get that from these two skills. That's why we can use the Trash Pot. Not all builds, not all setups have that, so some setups have to run the Essence of Weapon Power to get Major Brutality or Major Savagery. Often people forget these buffs, because in endgame it's pretty normal to drink these potions, because people just spam that stuff every 45 seconds. But as a new player these might be too expensive, so people only use these or they don't use potions at all. And then they lose Major Brutality and Major Savagery. That's a huge damage loss. Please don't forget, in the crafting section, in the alchemy, medicinal use. When using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. You want to have this on every toon that you use to do combat on, because 30% is a lot. And this, it takes like 15-20 minutes to level up. I have a grind guide on alcasthq.com as well in the crafting section. Usually potions last 33 seconds, but with this passive they last 47 seconds and the potion cooldown is 45 seconds. That means you can get 100% uptime on the Major Endurance buff. Even more important if you use like these potions, so you get Brutality and Savagery all the uptime. But like I mentioned on this build, the green ones, they also drop from world, like from monsters and stuff like that. They're very cheap. These are enough for this setup. In terms of race, all stamina based races work with this setup, no problem at all. I prefer Orc because it has 258 weapon damage and 2000 max stamina on top of 1000 extra health. Just a really nice package. That's usually why I always pick Orc. Should you be a werewolf or a vampire? So you can be a werewolf. It will fit well with this setup, but the vampire is pretty much a no-go. In terms of gear, I will show you the tier 1 setup, what you should aim for. On the website you will find the tier 2 and the beginner setup as well. So, first off, on this setup I have Zogwin. This is simply pretty much my all-rounder set. It has 2 weapon crit bonuses and a physical penetration one. Then the 5-piece is very interesting. When you deal critical damage, you gain a stack of precision, increasing your weapon critical by 129 for 10 seconds, up to 10 stacks. That equals around 6% weapon critical. I'm not sure why this weird number, nobody knows what it actually is. But it's around 6% when you're maxed out. At max stacks you also gain minor force, increasing your critical damage down by 10%. So in a group build, people often use trap to get minor force, but we have better things to do, like reapply our buffs and so on. That's why Zogwin is really powerful on this setup, because it gives us minor force for free. This set drops in Frostwald, normal mode. Go get it. If you don't have the DLC, you could simply run Hunting's Rage, which is the crafted set. That's on my tier 2 setup. You can ask a buddy, hey, can you craft me Hunting's Rage? And you're good to go. And replace it with Zogwin. The next set is Briarheart. This is my favorite. Why do I like this so much? First off, it has weapon crit, max stam, weapon crit, so these bonuses are really nice. And the 5-piece bonus. When you deal critical damage, you have a 25% chance to increase your weapon damage by 450 for 10 seconds. That's a huge boost, but that's not even the nice part. While this effect is active, your critical strikes heal you for 378 health. That doesn't sound very strong. However, this is more or less always my first or second strongest heal when I'm fighting. Like when I'm doing veteran dungeons alone, this will almost always be on top, because it doesn't have a cooldown, and a lot of people don't know that. So now when I have my Endless Hail on the ground, I have Growing Swarm on the enemy, I pop my Bird, my Sub-Assault. That's a lot of damage over time effects that all, well, it's not. These two are my damage over time effects that tick every second, and these here are my direct damage abilities. And that's just a lot of attacks per second, and all of them can crit. So every time we get a crit, we will heal, as long as Briarheart is active. So we get 450 weapon damage and a buttload of healing with this set. You can buy this in the guild store or farm it. You don't need gold jewelry, you don't need purple jewelry. Blue is more than enough. The difference between blue and gold jewelry is almost zero. When we look at the robust trait here, we have 870 max stamina. The blue jewelry will have around 800. So you just lose a very small amount of max stamina. And the blue jewelry, I bought the full stack for 10k in the guild stores, so it barely costs anything. The two-handed weapon, I also bought it in the guild store for 8k with a bad trait, and then I transmuted it to sharpened. Because usually if you pick a weapon with a bad trait, it's not very expensive. But if you pick it with a perfect trait, it will be super expensive. So yeah, it's very easy to get Briarheart. You can also farm it if you want, but usually the guild stores have enough of the blue jewelry, but maybe after this video the price will go up, I'm not sure. Anyway, on the back bar I have the Maelstrom Bow. You can get this one in normal Maelstrom Arena. Very easy to get, but a very powerful set. Because it increases the damage volley deals by 430 each tick. The bonus increases by 143 every time volley ticks. This is one of your strongest AoE and single target ability, because it just ramps up damage constantly. On top of that, we run an infused trait with a weapon damage enchantment. So when we activate this, and this is on the ground, and we're on the front bar, it will keep dealing damage, and it will keep proccing the weapon damage enchantment. 452 weapon damage for free. I can show you this. So I apply this, it gives me the weapon damage enchantment. Now I'm on the front bar, and it will reapply. Bloop, reapply. That's constantly up. As long as you keep Endless Hail up, this will stay up 100%. That's a lot of extra weapon damage. On top of the crazy damage we get. Make sure to go get that. The last set is Turbokun. You don't necessarily need this. You could run Bloodspawn, you could run a damage set like Selene, Velidrev, whatever floats your boat. I personally prefer Turbokun for more difficult dungeons. When I was testing these builds, all my solo builds in veteran dungeons, soloing them, Turbokun gave me the biggest advantage because of the minor maim. It gives a health bonus, and then when you take damage from a nearby enemy, you summon a growing pool of desecrated bile for 8 seconds. Enemies in the bile take 122 disease damage every 1 second and are afflicted with minor maim and minor defile for 4 seconds, reducing the damage done by 15% and healing received and health recovery by 15%. This has a 16 seconds cooldown. 15% damage reduction. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you have 10 enemies that are hitting you and all of them have 15% less damage, that's a lot of damage reduction. On top of that, if you're fighting bosses which have very hard hitting abilities or attacks, 15% can be a lot very fast. Now I want you to understand that you can get, so people usually think, well, it only has 8 seconds uptime and a 16 seconds cooldown, so it only can have a 50% uptime. That's not true. Because the bile lasts for 8 seconds, and on second 8, it will reapply minor maim on the enemies for another 4 seconds. So you get 12 seconds of minor maim on all the enemies, then 4 seconds is without minor maim, and then it will proc again. And you will have minor maim for 12 seconds. So it's 8 seconds plus 4. So you can have pretty much a 75% uptime on this. And it's very obvious to see because it's a huge, like what you saw at the start of the video. It's a huge green circle. It looks pretty cool as well. So that's why I prefer this, just a lot of damage mitigation. Like I mentioned, if you don't have that, because it's pretty hard to get, you can always use Bloodspawn or any other monster set that deals damage. I run 6 medium, 1 heavy, all divine trait. Then I have a health glyph on my head and 1 on the chest. So we get to this value of health. On the jewelry, I just leave robust. You could technically use bloodthirsty as well, up to you. All weapon damage enchants. Then the two-handed weapon is sharpened with poisons, just to get more damage. The ingredients are on the website. If you don't want to use them or you don't have the money, you can simply use Absorb Stamina Enchantment. It will deal physical damage and also restore stamina. On the back bar, like I mentioned, infused with a weapon damage enchantment. Let's check out the champion points. I do have 300 and 500-600 CP setups on the website as well, in case you're not maxed out. 64, 53, 52, 40. It's very strong. And then we have 61 in Master at Arms. Tumbling 61% and Shadow Ward 61 points and Shadow Ward 31 points. The reason why we have a lot in Tumbling is we will dodge roll a lot on this build. Especially when you're doing harder content, you can just prevent a lot of one-shots by simply dodge rolling. Like a boss heavy attack, what would kill you with like 60k damage, you can just dodge roll it, 0 damage. That's how powerful dodge roll is. And for me, it might be like, because I have done dungeons a lot, so I know how bosses, like what attacks they have, the attacks patterns, the mechanics. But the more you will play, the more stuff you will learn. So for me, it might be obvious when I have to dodge roll. For you, it might not be, so you might die. But again, you keep repeating stuff, you will learn it. And then at some point, you will also understand when you have to dodge roll, or when you have to block, shield, heal, and all that stuff. 43 in tenacity, because heavy attacks restore stamina. Not a lot of people know that, but heavy attacks actually give you like 3000 stamina back. I can showcase it real quick. Just look at the stamina bar. You see how much I actually get back? Like 3k. That's a lot. If the enemy is off balanced, you get twice the amount of resources back, so 6k. Pretty nice, and not a lot of people know that. 56 in Mooncalf, 56 in Warlord, 23 in Bashing Focus. And here I have 32 quick recovery, 49, 49, 48, 31, 61. Pretty basic or like standard setup. Like I mentioned, if you don't have max CP, it's on the website. Let's take a look at the few passives, because Warden has some nice, juicy passives. This one first. So when you cast an animal companion ability while you are in combat, you generate 4 ultimate points. That's like a nice freebie to have, because we're using the Wild Guardian. And when you want to cast its ultimate ability, it doesn't really cost a lot. 75 ultimate to activate it, and that will just ramp up the ulti gen a little bit faster. Then Flourish increases your magic and stamina recovery by 12% if an animal companion ability is slotted. 12% is a huge boost, and we have that on both bars. Nice. Advanced Species, 2% more damage per animal companion ability slotted. So we have 1, 2, 3 here. It's very powerful. Then Maturation. When you activate a heal on yourself or an ally, you grant the target minor toughness, increasing their max health by 10% for 20 seconds. That's why I mentioned when you activate Boom Edge. Now look at my health. The first time it doesn't do anything, but the second time you recast it, it will pump you up to 19k. Very nice. And then here we have a little bit, not really, like, you get snare reduction 15%. I guess it's nice to have. And yeah, this one is also pretty useless. But yeah, the ones here are nice, and then Maturation and the others one not that useful. On the website I have a passive section where I list up which ones you actually need and which you don't. The two-handed. I want to talk about Battle Rush. So with a two-handed weapon equipped, increases your stamina recovery by 30% for 10 seconds after you're killing a target. Once you kill an enemy, you get a 30% boost. This will bump us up to like 2k, 2.2k stamina recovery. A lot of people forget that. Then, when you deal damage with a fully charged heavy attack, your next direct damage attack used within 7 seconds deals an additional 10%. So that's a nice freebie, a little bit extra damage. Cost reduction on our two-handed abilities, very nice. Heavy weapons. So I usually prefer an axe, because axes grant your melee attacks a 16% chance to apply a bleed, dealing 10k physical damage over 6 seconds. So the bleed is just a nice damage over time effect. Then you have Forceful. Your light and heavy attacks damage up to 3 other nearby enemies. It's like a little bit of splash damage. On the bow bar, you only really need Ranger to reduce the stamina cost of your bow abilities. And Hasty Retreat, which gives you the speed buff. When you dodge roll on the bow bar, you get the speed buff for like 4 seconds, so you can run around faster. If you dodge roll on the front bar, it will not give you the speed buff. Medium armor passives, they're very powerful. First off, we get a buttload of extra crit from Dexterity. This one, extra stamina recovery and stamina cost reduction. This is a must-have. This one doesn't really matter that much. Then Agility, 15% extra weapon damage. And roll dodge cost reduction. And also movement speed bonus increase. But the roll dodge cost reduction is the important one on this here. So these are very important. Because we run one heavy armor piece, I recommend at least using Juggernaut, because that gives you 2% extra max health. So all these modifiers add up at some point. If you have the points, you can also use Constitution, because we have one heavy armor piece, and Resolve, just to bump up resistances a little bit and sustain. Soul Magic. I want to talk about Consuming Trap real quick. You could use this. Why do I mention this ability? Because when you read the second half of the text, if an affected enemy dies, you fill an empty soul gem, doesn't matter, and heal for 3,500. And now, you also restore 2,000 magicka and 6,600 stamina. That's crazy. That's a lot. So if you want, you could replace it with Growing Swarm, place it on a low health monster, and once it dies, you get 6k stamina for free. This is a very strong ability. Most of the time we have enough sustain, so we don't really need it. So, in Fighter's Guild, you need Banish the Wicked. You generate 9 ultimate when you kill an undead, dead or werewolf. A nice thing to have. Undaunted. You want to level this up on as much tunes as you can, because the Undaunted metal is nice. Increases your max health, stamina and magicka by 2% per type of armor. We have 6 medium, 1 heavy, so that's 2 types. That gives us a 4% overall bonus. If you don't have it, not a big deal, because that will take a while, but it's a nice freebie. All the racial passives and medicinal use. Don't forget that. Let's take a look at the skills that we use. So Brawler is pretty much my favorite solo ability. Every time we activate this, first off we deal damage. And on top of that, you also gain a damage shield that absorbs 4,459 damage for 6 seconds. Each enemy hit increases the damage shield strength by 50%, up to 300. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when I hit one enemy with this, I already get a 6,690 shield. You can see on my health bar there. When I hit like 5 targets, it goes up to 20k. So when there is a lot of monsters coming, I usually just use this ability. And it deals a lot of damage and it gives me a 20k shield every time I use it. It's just so strong. It's really nice. Sub-Assault, very powerful ability. So you want to use this every second, or like every third ability pretty much. It deals a lot of damage and it also applies Major Fracture, reducing their physical resistance by 5,280. It's AoE Fracture ability that deals a buttload of damage and it debuffs the enemies, so you will do even more damage. The debuff is only 6 seconds. If you're good at weaving, you will keep this up all the time. But sometimes when you're too slow, the debuff might fall off for a second or two. And we have Cutting Dive, so this is our bird attack. Bird attack. You could use another spammable here. This one deals decent damage, and then also if you're more than 7 meters away from the target, you set them off balance for 7 seconds. The enemy is set already off balance, the Cliff Racer rips through them, causing them to bleed. So if the enemy is already off balance, it will apply a bleed. It has really nice side effects. And like I mentioned before, if you heavy attack an off balanced enemy, you get twice the amount of resources back. Sorry. Next up, we have Reverse Slice. This is our execute ability that also has splash damage. So every time we hit our main target, there will also be AoE damage. Very powerful. Echoing Vigor. A lot of players ask me, yo Alcast, why are you not using Resolving Vigor? It's meant to use, like, to play with a solo setup. Echoing Vigor is for groups. That's not always true. Most of the times, yes, but on these solo builds, Echoing Vigor heals for more than enough, and it has a way longer duration. That's why I use it. So, Resolving Vigor heals for a crazy amount. It just overheals like to a stupid level, and it only lasts 4 seconds. Whereas Echoing Vigor heals for a really good amount, pretty much what we actually need, and it lasts 10 seconds. So it lasts 2.5 times as long as Resolving Vigor. So I can cast this, it will last 10 seconds and I can deal damage, reapply dots, yada yada, and then heal again. When I use the Resolving Vigor, I heal, I deal damage, I have to heal again, deal damage, I have to heal again. So would you rather be reapplying your heal all the time or actually deal damage? That's why this one is just way better. 10 seconds, more than enough, and the heal is strong. But like I mentioned, this is only true for these solo builds. It really depends what you want to do. Wild Guardian. The bear ultimate deals a buttload of damage. If you want, you can use other ultimates as well. But I feel like the bear fits well with this setup. You have to double bar this. On the back bar, we have Ice Fortress. This gives us major resolve, increasing physical and spell resistance. So instead of 15k and like 12k, we are bumping up to almost 21 and 18k. On top of providing us with minor protection, even more damage mitigation. So that's a lot of extra damage mitigation. The ability lasts for 24 seconds, so it's very easy to keep up. It costs magicka, so it doesn't really drain our stamina that we need for other stuff. The Bull Netch doesn't cost anything to cast. On top of that, it gives us 5000 stamina back over 25 seconds and boosts our weapon damage by 20% because of Major Brutality. Green Lotus. This heals on every light and heavy attack you do, and also gives you Major Savagery, increasing weapon crit by 10% for 20 seconds. So I usually recommend reapplying these at the same time, because they provide so much perks and like major and minor buffs to you. You should always keep them up. These two last 25 and 24, and this one is 20. But it doesn't matter if you reapply them a little bit too early, be good to go. Growing Swarm, this is a damage over time effect on the enemy. I like this to call my flex spot. I like this because it deals nice damage. And then the middle text. The Fetcher Flies rip through the original enemy's flesh, afflicting them with minor vulnerability for the duration, increasing their damage taken by 8%. If you apply this on the enemy, they get minor vulnerability applied, which is very nice, so you will deal more damage. Endless Hail, like I mentioned before with the Maelstrom Bow, very powerful, and also keeps our weapon damage enchantment active on the back bar. So you always want to keep this up. This here has a 14-second duration, this here has a 10-second. I usually reapply these at the same time though. So if this has a little bit of downtime, it doesn't really matter that much. Still good to go. But these are all the abilities. There's a few others that you could use. For example, let me re-up. Falcon Swiftness. But you would have to remove either Reverse Slice or something else. Well, probably this would be best to remove. Because Bird of Prey gives you minor Berserk, which will increase your damage done by 8%. But then you have to replace it with Reverse Slice, so you don't really have Execute, which is also not optimal. You could use Living Vines on the back bar as well, the leeching one. So every time you get hit, you heal. Well, most of the times, the Echoing Vigor, the Green Lotus and the Briarheart is more than enough. In the end, play around, see what feels great, what doesn't, swap out abilities that you don't like, and then you're good to go. Before we check out the outfit, I just want to reiterate. Healing. We have Briarheart, which heals for a buttload of health every second as long as Briarheart is up. Echoing Vigor, which is very easy to keep up on the front bar, has a 10-second duration. And there's a nice freebie. We also have Green Lotus that heals us for a little bit every time we do a light or a heavy attack. Dodge roll is your best friend. A 60k hit in my face can turn into a 0 damage hit because, well, the enemy can't hit me when I dodge roll. That's not true for all attacks, but for most. You're fighting against bosses and stuff like that. Dodge rolling can just save your ass a lot. Blocking. Learning when to block is very important, and when you block, I usually also recommend using the shield, because you block, you mitigate a lot of damage, and then you also have a 7k shield. So the enemy has to hit your shield first because before it hits your health. Always keep up your healing, don't forget that, and the buffs and debuffs. Green Lotus for Major Savagery, Bull Netch for extra stamina and the Brutality buff. Ice Fortress just to gain more damage mitigation. And once all that is taken care of, you actually have time to deal damage. There's a lot of things to do, because we're playing solo, we have to heal ourselves, we have to figure out how to mitigate damage, we have to figure out how to sustain, and so on. Once again, heavy attacks. 3000 stamina every time I do a heavy attack. And now if the enemy is set off balance, we get 6000 back. If I drop low on stamina, I usually just weave heavy attacks. So even though I will deal damage, I actually gain more and more stamina. Very important. The game doesn't really tell you that, so it's really hard to like figure out if nobody tells you. Like I mentioned, 19k health value should be the goal, and you should have around 1400, 1500 stamina recovery on buff. Let's check out the outfit real quick. Mazatoon, Silver Dawn, Silver Dawn, Silver Dawn. More of it. The weapon is a Velkinar Maul and a Maelstrom Bow. This here is Apricot Outrage color, and then we have Marble White. These are the only two colors I used. If you have any questions, you can join our community Discord, link in the description, or ask me on twitch.tv/alcasthq. When I live stream and when I'm not super busy, like in a raid or just like activity, you can ask questions and I will usually try to answer them as good as possible. In the end, the more you play, the more experienced you will get, and the game will get more fun. There's a lot of things to take care of, and you need to level up a lot of things for your character. But I think that that's also what makes the game shine, because your character has so much uniqueness. Like, nobody looks the same. There's just so much abilities that you can use and that are useful. It really makes the game fun to play. Please, there's a few other videos that you can watch. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that juicy like button. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. Cheers.